how are you? So the other day I tested Google's new product, NotebookLM, and by feeding it one single URL, I was able to generate a pretty thought-provoking podcast. And if you're interested in that, you can look at that podcast in this link here. And today, a very exciting new update came where you can actually talk to a YouTube video. Oh, you guessed it right. I am using an Andrew Huberman podcast as an example. 2024 may just be the year I complete watching all the Huberman Lab podcasts. This is how to do it exactly. Let me show you. Okay, so the first thing, we have to go to notebooklm.google. And here, if you want, you can scroll down to learn more about what this tool can offer and how you can take advantage of it. And today, we're just gonna go through a quick tutorial, and we're gonna click on Try NotebookLM. And note that if you're already logged into your Gmail account, you will be automatically directed using your Gmail account. All right, here, we're gonna start a new notebook. So click on this. And immediately, it's asking you to add sources. Now, if you scroll down a little bit, under the link selection, it used to be just website, but they just added YouTube. So here, you're actually adding a YouTube link rather than uploading a video. So here is where we're gonna paste in a YouTube link. What can be an exciting YouTube video you guys wanna try? I think to better utilize this Google Note summarizing function, we should try something reasonably long and very useful. And immediately I thought about using none other than the Andrew Huberman Lab podcast. I just went to the popular tab. Obviously you can try anything you like, but I'm gonna choose this one where he interviewed Robert Greene and they're talking about how to find and achieve your unique purpose. So here is the link, and you can see this whole podcast is 3 hours, 11 minutes, and 17 seconds long. So it definitely is a long one. I know it's really popular. By no means I'm suggesting that we should skip listening to this entire podcast, but for a fun experiment, I think we should try. Why not? So here, I'm copy just this link and we go back to NotebookLM, paste in this link. Okay, now we have the link here. Now all we have to do is just click on insert and let it do the magic. All right, almost immediately, we can see the summary generated. Okay, if you want, you can take some time to read this. I think it looks very reasonable. What are the core concepts that Robert Greene emphasizes to give individual towards fulfilling their unique purpose? I think we can try this one. It's definitely taking its time, and don't forget that it's a over 3 hour long video podcast. So it's very interesting. Again, if you have not tried it, NotebookLM will give you citation. If you just hover over these citations, it will give you the corresponding section where podcast covered this. So you may choose to go back to the video and rewatch that specific segment. I think that's really helpful. Well, let's look at one or two answers. Identify your impulse voices from childhood. Recognize your grain of intelligence. Pay attention to your feelings of frustration and anxiety. I think it's relatively nice to have a note summarized for you after a 3 hour long video. You can either use this as something like your personal notes after watching a long episode, so you have a better chance to remember what you learned from this episode. Or if you're like me, sometimes we just don't have enough time to watch or listen the entire episode. We can ask NotebookLM to help us decide whether we're going to invest 3 hours into this episode or not, right? So you can go through these quick bullet point style summarization and decide whether you want to learn more or not. Well, I would like to ask some different questions. So I have a habit of testing out at least a few different questions before I decide whether I wanted to watch the whole episode or not. And one of them is that I always ask this question: what are some of the most counterintuitive points mentioned in this podcast? Okay, we've got 4 bullet points. Finding your purpose through frustration, the power of vulnerability in seduction and love, less ground as a catalyst for growth, embracing limitations to enhance appreciation. I have to say this is very intriguing. It definitely piqued my interest. I think after viewing these bullet points, I definitely want to go back and watch the whole episode myself. What about you? Okay, now let's go back to the main interface. You can do so by clicking Notebook Guide here. Go back to the chat interface and click again. You're back to the summary interface where you can choose to generate an audio podcast. So here we're facing a very interesting choice that we just asked the AI to summarize a long podcast for us. And now we're generating a short podcast summary of a long podcast. That's kind of like an interesting meta situation. But why not? Let's give it a try. It usually takes around 2 to 3 minutes to generate a podcast, regardless of how much materials you feed the model, given my experiences experimenting with this tool. So it's pretty convenient. So while I'm waiting for the AI to generate a podcast for a longer podcast, I also asked 2 more questions. Surprisingly, it could not answer me. As you can tell here, please list actionable recommendations from this talk. Didn't see anything. And I also asked, can you design an exercise for me to find my purpose? It also responded the system was unable to answer. So I am not sure whether it's because this NotebookLM tool can only answer questions strictly related to retrieving information and summarizing information from this talk, or just because maybe I'm just unlucky today and the network connection is not very good. So if you have tried it, please let me know down in the comments. Well, the moment is now. We now have a podcast summary of a longer podcast. I'm not going to play the whole podcast to bore you, but let's try maybe the first 10 or 20 seconds.
Ready for a deep dive with me? We're going to unpack some seriously insightful stuff about purpose from Robert Greene. You know him, the mastermind behind Mastery and the 48 Laws of Power, right?
Oh, for sure. His work is incredible.
Totally. So he did this fascinating interview with neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, and let me tell you, their conversation is pure gold. We're talking light bulb moments left and right.
I'm ready.
Okay, so
it's actually not bad. I would encourage you to try copy and paste in the videos that you're interested in and use NotebookLM to generate summaries and questions to help you decide whether you want to invest more time listening to this podcast or video or using it as an intelligent note-taking tool. So how do you like this experiment generating a podcast for a longer podcast? I think it's very interesting. Although we do see some shortcomings here, or maybe it's just my computer and network. It's still very refreshing and helpful to have some tool there to help us decide on whether we want to invest time further. If you're interested, I would encourage you to watch this video here where I copy and pasted a Charlie Munger talk and asked NotebookLM to generate a podcast over that. You can try that out yourself as well. If you find this video helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, as I will release weekly tutorials to help you level up your AI and learning skills.